Welcome everybody to another episode of our Perceptive podcast series here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. For our chat this week, we have another indie dev interview lined up. We're going to be talking with a developer who has been working on their own take on the kind of survival crafter formula for at least 8.5 years. And the game is going to be due out either very shortly around the time this cast goes up, or may already be out. So please welcome from Larion Games, Jason Guthrie. How are you doing?
Yep, good, thanks. How about yourself?
I am doing alright. Busy as always around here between library talks, videos, books, game design things and all that. I'm sure it is very busy for you as well.
Yeah, releasing next month. I'm in crunch mode for sure.
So, for our chat tonight, and the name of the game, I'm going to try and say, hopefully I won't butcher this too badly, is it Aiyana?
Yep, that's the one.
Nice. At least I got that one right.
To be fair, I think that's the pronunciation, so it's based on a Native American word, and I'm fairly sure that's how it's pronounced, but I could be butchering it myself.
Alright. But it is great to have you on. Thanks again for reaching out on Discord and 3 minutes. We had a little bit of some spam-related shenanigans, of course, with having both non-Gmail-related emails, but I am really glad you managed to get in touch.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I'm trying to desperately have anything and everything to spread the name and get the word out there.
So, for our chat tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about the game and a little bit more about survival crafting and survival crafting design. So, since this is your first time on the chat, Jason, for the people listening to us right now, could you tell us a little bit about what your background is and what is kind of the elevator pitch for Aiyana?
Okay, my background's quite a big one. Do you want me to kind of... You happy for me to go into detail with that? Okay.
Sure.
So I started in the apps and software business. So I actually, to be fair, I came out of university and I started my first company. And I released my first game on Xbox 360 with XNA. Microsoft refused to pay me for, I think it was 5 years or something ridiculous like that. Because what it was is that XNA was on the end of it and everything was automated. So I kind of fell through the net. One of my documents wasn't processed. And because everything was automated, I couldn't speak to anyone. So I had no way to get the document processed. So no money was being sent. So that sucked. So from there, I went into software and apps. It was a company where it was basically... It sold itself as a games company. It did have a bit of a games history, but if you were competent, you spent most of the time on apps and software because that's where it made the money. So it was a bit of an interesting career because I was kind of always dangled, oh yeah, you can work on games, but I never got that much time spent working on games. I was always working on the paid projects that kept the company afloat. Paid very well though, so all my side money went into Aiyana, and I'll be perfectly honest, I hated my day job. I was asked to do a lot of questionable things, and I started Aiyana just as something I loved. It was just something for a challenge. I just needed that challenge when I came home at night. So I never really set out to, I had some grand goals in mind, but I mainly set out to just kind of give myself that challenge. I love Minecraft, and I wanted to recreate something like Minecraft, and to be honest, it annoyed me how much it relied on mods. I felt like there was so much it could do better as a base game, and it never chose to improve upon itself. It just relied on mods to improve it. So that's why I set out to try and fix something about it. I've done a lot of other stuff in between. So I spent a fair bit of time being a graphics and optimization consultant of sorts. And I've just been trying desperately to get Aiyana over the line. I probably should shout out, I was funded by the UK government for about a year. I got a grant for UK Games Fund, and that was really beneficial and really helped to kind of give me some confidence to take this project further instead of being a side passion project. That's what kind of turned it into I can take more risks on this. I'll spend more time on this. Elevator pitch for Aiyana. So I always kind of describe it as it's Minecraft meets Avatar. And to me, I wanted to focus much more on the RPG element. So basically, what I want eventually, if it isn't there yet, is your structures come alive. So if you build that big castle, you trigger an infinite wave of enemies and they attack your castle, and it's then how effective is that at fighting off the enemies? What sort of score can you get fighting them off? So that's kind of my big aim for what I want Aiyana to be.
Yeah, and as I said at the start, you've been working on this for, I think it's about 8.5 years, is that right?
Yeah, something like that. I struggle to remember. So I know the company was founded about I think it was about 7.5 years ago, but I forget exactly how long I was working on the game before I founded this company. And yeah, so it's probably about 8.5 years at this point, maybe about 8, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about wanting to kind of make a more improved version of Minecraft's formula, as the game has never, excuse me, as the game hasn't really like evolved as much, like outside of modding support. So, I guess with like, if you can remember, again, 8 years is certainly a very long time. What was kind of like at the beginning, like what was your goal in terms of trying to make a bigger and better Minecraft?
I guess it was that feeling of playing Minecraft, and then you'd look around and you have a chest full of diamonds, and you'd be like, now what? Like, I never took on the Ender Dragon, even though I'm a very goal-oriented person. I like to complete things, but it just didn't. It just kind of felt like the cohesive in Minecraft wasn't there. If you tried to summarize it as, oh yeah, the goal is to go and beat the Ender Dragon, like, okay, so the goal of a game is combat. That's not really true. And if you look at it from that perspective, combat sucks in Minecraft. Like, it's so primitive and basic. So that was one of the things I tried to focus on. Is that, well, if the end goal is to defeat a boss, then the game should cater towards that. It should have better mechanics. It should have better combat. So that was definitely one of the first kind of founding principles I had in mind and something I wanted to fix whilst I was developing.
And I think that's a very interesting point because, like, for people watching us right now, like, longtime fans know that I am not a huge survival crafter fan. I've tried, like, the only ones I think I've really enjoyed have been, like, stuff like Power World and Subnautica, where in those games, again, like, anyone who's played survival crafters know, like, they're not really, like, survival crafting. Like, it's always about getting your base, like, this point of stability, and then it's there. Like, you won't have to worry about hunger if you just have 10 rows of gardens pumping out the best food every 10 minutes. And that can sometimes be very different, say, like a game like a Minecraft, or what was it? The Long Dark. Like, the Long Dark is, like, that is heavy on the survival side. Like, you're not meant to become stable. And, like you said with Minecraft, it's a very goal-oriented game, but it felt, at least like to me when I play again, it's been years since the last time I touched Minecraft, that a lot of it just felt, I guess, like, too aimless for me. And I guess, like, with Aiyana and with, like, your own thoughts on survival crafting, like, what do you feel are, like, good goals, or what do you think is, like, good progression in a game like this, or in a survival crafter, I mean?
Oof. So yeah, I agree with you fully. Like, I think Minecraft, like, that's another thing I want to solve. It feels so make your own goals, and that's something I've never enjoyed. It's kind of like people get excited by tell your own story, and to me, that's such a stupid thing to do because the whole point of a story is to have climax or to have anticipation. You can't have anticipation if you're telling your own story because you know what's coming. So to me, that's kind of what's broken in Minecraft. It's just like, well, if you're setting your own goals, it doesn't feel like you've accomplished as much when you achieve them. Sorry, I got sidetracked a bit there. So, yeah, I guess, I mean, it's a very open question in terms of what is a good reward, I guess, is what you're really asking there. Because then if you complete the goal and you feel like, oh, yeah, I've overcome this challenge, then that's great. But the problem with that is that, say, for example, if you level up a lot and then the way you defeated that is, oh, you one-hit the boss. Some people that feels like a great achievement, but to other people that's anticlimactic. That's like, oh, I've broken the game a wee bit. That wasn't a challenge. So it really depends on the sort of player you're catering towards. So, like, if it's a Dark Souls game, if it's a properly challenging boss and you finally beat it, then to that sort of player, that's going to feel great. But to other players who are just going to give up, they're not going to enjoy that. That's not going to be a good enough goal for them to be like, okay, I've actually overcome this complicated mechanic. I just wanted to see that final video in the game, or I just wanted to feel like I got that achievement. So it's, yeah, I feel it's very hard to answer that because it depends very, very much on the player, and this genre really tries to cater to a lot of player types. That's something I've been struggling with. So, for example, a lot of the testing we've done of the game is at a museum. There's a local museum that does, it's down in Bradford, and it does like a like a games festival of sorts. And whenever we take it there, it's full of kids. And the kids have completely different goals and progressions. Like, they're great for kind of testing because they're raw feedback and they just kind of verbalize everything that they're doing. But they they care about such completely different things to usual players. So like they'll see the objectives and they'll be like, nah, screw that, I want to do what I want. And they get fun out of not doing the objectives because they feel like they're being a bit rebellious and they're doing their own thing and they're off exploring. So yeah, trying to cater to those players as well as players who want the challenge, which is what I like. It's trying to tick all the boxes at once is a bit of a juggling act.
And I think like what you said there, Jason, is a really good point. And it's something that I think this gets brought up a lot when we talk about kind of sandbox or open-ended style games. Is that there are people who, if you have 50 goals on a to-do list, their mission in life is going to be to check off every one of those 50 goals. And the second goal 50 is done, I'm finished, the game is done, I'm free, I go on to the next thing. And then you have people who are, if this game lets me build something, I'm going to recreate the entire Shire from Lord of the Rings. Even if this takes me the next 5 to 10 years of my life, I will do this. I don't care about those goals. I don't care about a shiny level up. And there are a lot, and again, like, it's always that challenge of, as you said, like, you're catering to very different markets. And it even goes back to something as old as, say, The Sims. Like, I know, like, for people listening to this, there are some die-hard Sims fans. And
my wife is one of them. Yep.
And The Sims, in the same way as, like, Minecraft and a lot of, like, the open-ended games, just, it didn't really hook me, because I'm also very goal-oriented. I want to have a mission to achieve, whether it takes me 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 months. And it's why I think, for me, like, I gravitate towards a lot of the logistics-style games, like Dyson Sphere Program, Factorio.
Oh, yeah.
Something where, yes, I'm in control of how I achieve the goal, but there's still a goal. There's still that super high-end thing I need to build in order to win the game. Or, you know, there's some, like, if you're just telling me, oh, build 75,000 conveyor belts just because, I'm like, like, okay. If you tell me build 75 million conveyor belts so I can move the sun into, like, another planet and destroy the galaxy, okay, I'm in for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And with Aiyana, and from what I played of it, and again, like, we played the kind of demo build, it is available for people watching as of right now. You're trying to, again, like, have this combination of, you can do anything that you want, but we also have a lot more guided progression in the form of the different checklist challenges in terms of the upgrade system. And I think I said this when I was talking about, like, the upgrade system reminds me a lot of, like, of a CRPG. The more you do something, the more it levels up. So if you just keep hopping around, you'll eventually keep raising up your jump skill. What was it like, I guess, figuring out, like, how much you wanted there to be progression? Because, again, there are a lot of these games where progression is just gear-based. I have the wooden sword, now I have the iron sword, and the steel sword, and the gold sword, and we just keep going down the mineral line.
I guess that's come from two places. So the obvious one is Skyrim. So yeah, I love their progression system there, where each thing you did would, well, I guess you get stronger at what you did first, and more you blacksmith, the better you blacksmithing got. And the other side where it came from was World of Warcraft. I always felt like it was such a strange game loop they had, where so much of the game was, oh, you've got to get to that max level. Like, it's so important to level up. You've got to get to that max level. And then you get there, and it's like, no, that's completely useless. It's weird. It's kind of like, well, you spent all this time saying it's the most important thing to be gathering experience, and then now it literally does nothing because you've hit the max level. That, to me, was always a very strange thing. It's like you've taught something and then untaught it. So that's something I want to break with the infinite level up attributes, because it felt like, well, even though it might now take you 1 million experience to get another 0.1 in mining speed, you've at least not lost that feeling of, well, I'm now always getting something for doing this. Yeah, I might be grinding, going down, getting all this stone, but I'm at least getting something for it. It's just something that always disappointed me in World of Warcraft, so that's something I wanted to plug as well. It's just kind of a bit of a bugbear, I guess, I wanted to address. As well, I guess, Crackdown. Crackdown's a game I quite enjoyed, how it just it had that crazy elements of just like everything just kind of went a bit crazy off the scales. And so I emulated that a little bit in Aiyana, but I didn't want to go too far with it because it's a tricky balance. Like there's there's fun in the absurdity and the chaos fair, and that kind of caters to the sandbox environment of, well, now you can go flying around, now you can go sprinting around really fast. But yeah, I don't want to make it too tedious. So that's been a tricky balance of trying to keep those attributes in play. But it just kind of felt like a sensible progression. I was just like, well, you've got this world, let's give you more fun and more tools to try and break it and try to explore it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about like the world and what you're doing it, I was looking at the store page, and you have like one section, the anti-wiki feature, and how things can start off and be different. And for people listening to us right now, can you go into a little bit more explanation about what that is in Aiyana?
Okay. Yep, sure. So basically, I wanted to try and stop people from just going up online and reading the answers. So it's something I do myself a lot, and I feel like it breaks the game a bit. You know, it removes that fun of actually exploring. And I feel like since this game is about exploring, that's something I really wanted to kind of preserve, is that sense of exploration. So how the feature works is that in one game, in one world, it might be that an animal's favorite food is an apple. So say the cows like apples, but in another world, the cow's favorite food might be wheat. So the way that you have to figure out, if you're trying to raise your animal, the best food to give it, you have to experiment, you have to explore. It's a bit of an experimental feature. I'm not sure if it's going to be for everyone, but so far people seem to quite enjoy it. But I quite like this idea of just no longer being able to cheat and just be able to find your answer online. It's something that you now have to kind of go back to your roots of just playing things like when you were a kid. You have to just go figure it out. You can't just, well, if you stole your mom's money, you could go call the cheat hotline for $1.50 a minute and get the cheats, I guess. But yeah, it was just a way of going back to those roots of how I used to play games.
And yeah, like, to me, I think I'm the same way. Like, I am not a wiki person. And it's very hard to fight that nature of what is the optimal sword, armor, shield strategy, and then just break the game. Because there's this classic quote, I forget who said it, but like, gamers will min-max the fun out of their games. And again, like, in a very goal-oriented game, it's so easy to just say, well, what is the best gear? Look it up. 1, 2, 3. Game is done. You know, there's nothing else left to do. And one thing I want to ask you about in terms of, like, I guess, like, both the anti-wiki feature as well as with the open world or procedural generation design. Is Aiyana, like, your first, like, work or kind of project using proc gen?
Yeah, I think it is, actually. Yeah, it is. Yep. I really dived in deep for the deep end with that one. My first project was like, I wouldn't say it's like a tower defense. I don't know if you ever played the games where you're like a guy on top of a bar and it's a zombie apocalypse and you're just clicking to shoot for zombies, and then you gotta, like, you get more money, you gotta pay for upgrades. That was kind of like what my first game was about. And in my professional career, I did do one game, and it was when hyper casual was starting to become a thing. So it was just a single touch app, a single mechanic. So yeah, I've kind of gone from that to this. I did make a game called Star Vortex for a break. That's also procedurally generated, but that came after Aiyana, or whilst I was already working on Aiyana. So yeah, no, this was my first attempt at this.
So the reason why I bring this up is, like, I've spoken with developers, I've spoken to a lot of roguelike developers when it comes to using proc gen. But I haven't really had a chance to talk to someone about, like, the survival crafting side of proc gen. So I wanted to just ask you again, like, this could be like probably its own cast in terms of when we go really specific. But what was kind of like your process, or what was it like working in proc gen, specifically with building the world of Aiyana? Like, if you could, like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's something that I've been tweaking continuously over the years. It's one of the biggest time sinks, I would think, is trying to work on making sure the world was generating properly. So at the very beginning, I won't lie, like, I started by looking at Minecraft source code. It was the first version of me generating it. It was my way of learning and figuring out how things were working in this sort of procedural environment. And I was just looking around, and I was just like, nah, like, I wanted something more natural. So what I went from there is I went around some mods, I saw how some of the mods did it to get some of the more natural setups, and holy crap, the performance with them was terrible. Like, they were doing some just some horrible calculations in terms of noise. They were trying to make things look really realistic, and they were doing like 90,000 iterations per chunk and such like, and it was just like, no, that's just not going to work. So I was kind of looking at the balance between these two systems and trying to find ways to find a nicer in between, and I've lost track of how many times I've reworked it. Currently, how it works is it starts with like a noise layer base to try and define temperatures and rainfall, and then from there, the best way to describe the logic is, I guess it's like layers in Photoshop. So you start with some data and you'll do things where it's like, okay, well, expand it slightly, and then you'll work with things where it's like, okay, now smooth it out. Now, if it's an ocean and it's surrounded by ocean, make it a deep ocean, and it's just kind of a collection of all these rules piled on top of each other. Yeah, honestly, I'm struggling to kind of avoid minefields that I could spend forever talking about. But that's the kind of core principle of building the world here, is just kind of this noise with all these rules laid on top of it. And then from there, in terms of actually defining how the world should be played, that was a really difficult one. So, for example, at the beginning, I was using sine and cosine and merging the two together. And the reason I was doing that is because it would make these wave patterns. And with these overlying wave patterns, how that would work is that if you set off in any direction and just walk straight, you would go through snow, and then you'd go through temperatures, or you'd find desert. So you'd kind of go through the full spectrum of the world if you walked straight. And I thought this was a good thing, but after a while of feeling and playing around the world, that just kind of, there was issues, for example, with sine and cosine, is where it would get very thin, and you start seeing like stretches where it just kind of go through an entire section of like cold, hot, cold, 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 hot. So I guess basically I just kind of took all these learnings of just like, oh, this one kind of works for this reason, and then I had to rework that formula, and then I just kind of find this hodgepodge balance until I was happy with the world. Right now it's in a state where I'm fairly happy with it, but there's overlap. So for example, you'll see things like a desert beside snow, which it's something where my older systems, that was something I prioritized much higher, where you would never see that. You would always have these nicer transitions. You'd always have these in-between biomes. But the problem with that is, in order to have that nicer transition, the worlds were huge. Like walking around the biomes, you'd have to walk for like 10 minutes to get across one biome to get into the other one. Mm-hmm. So striking that balance between realism and, well, actually, is it nice to have these transitions versus just, actually, it's more fun for gameplay if the savannas and the snow are right beside each other, because then that way you don't have to walk forever. You can avoid these pitfalls that realism delivers. Such a huge topic. Really hard to kind of stay focused on. This is how I did it. Just literally most of the development is just years of tweaking for world generation until it felt right.
Yeah. And like with like world generation, like one of the challenges I think I see from a lot of games, and I'm sure this is something that came up as you've been working on it, is that idea of, I guess, how do you make the world feel alive, but at the same time make it feel something that someone will want to play through? Because I have experienced so many examples of proc gen, and one of the easiest traps I've seen developers fall into is this idea of, let's just make the world do anything. Let's just, who cares about any kind of bounce? We could have, a volcano in an ice field above, an island. It's procedural, it's fun. But players I think a lot of players want some sense of control. They want this idea that there is a foundation to like the rules of your world and to the setting of it. And as you were tweaking like the proc gen, the algorithm, I guess, what did you settle on in terms of how you wanted this world to feel, in terms of, I guess, having someone go through it or progressing through it?
I guess for that it was, where did it feel tedious versus where did it feel fun? Mm-hmm. So as I said before, like the worlds were feeling, or the biomes were feeling too big. So if I felt like, ooh, what's that over there? That's kind of that mindset I was always kind of watching for people when they see something and be excited by it. So at first I tried to make the biomes quite big, so you'd feel like, oh, there's something cool looking over there, let's go explore. But if it took them about 5 minutes to go from, ooh, what's that over there, to actually getting over there, you could tell people were starting to kind of lose interest at that point. So I guess for me, it was just iteration. So like I've taken it to quite a few events and just I've lost track of how many people I've watched playing the game, and just kind of keeping track of watching to when you can tell they kind of start on an objective and go like, okay, I'm bored now, let's move on. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, I need to tweak this. Something's not quite right here. In terms of making the world feel alive, like that one, that's something that's always a bit of a tricky one. It's like the saying with games is that for about 90% of their life, they feel dead, like they feel terrible. Like it's only that last 10% is where they start feeling like a game. And I think that's exactly the case with making a biome feel alive. Like it's that small feature. So for me, I think making the grass bend and having that sense of wind, just some sort of movement in the world, that was the first sense of like, actually, this is starting to feel like a real world, just anything that moved. And so, for example, when I added the insects in there flying about the sky, that was a big moment where it felt like a living world instead of just a static scene that would just change over time. So yeah, the lighting would change, but the world still felt a bit empty until I added the insects. And then, of course, adding animals helped as well. But that's another one of those that's very tricky. So with I've optimized to high. I've worked with a contractor and he helped work on the animals, and we worked really hard to try and optimize it to high health so we can have tons of animals in there at once. And that was something that helped the world really feel alive. You know, you could see all these animals. I was like, all right, great. But it was also too challenging for children. So now we have this kind of continual balance of just like, well, we want to have loads of animals in the world, but we don't want it to be too challenging. So there's a bit of a sense of that still in there, where if you go in the water at the very beginning, there's absolutely tons of fish. So fish are a good example because it makes the world feel like, oh wow, it's really lush, there's loads of them, but they don't attack you. So very nice, easy one to balance. I can go nuts with a fish, and that's why there's absolutely hundreds of them in Aiyana. But the animals, there's much less of them because it's, you know, you're walking around and, oh shit, I'm attacked by a lion now. And it's like, some people will love that, and a lot of people be like, oh, I've lost my stuff. I have to walk for 20 minutes, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. And like to your point about like distance and like world space, that is another like very interesting and very challenging topic for a lot of these games. That there's always this idea that more is better. That the bigger the world, it means more the player can explore, which means the game is always going to be better. But conversely, as you said, like it looks like there's something really cool in the distance, but it's a 30-minute walk in real time to get there. Yeah. A lot of people are just going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, what am I going to do for like those the rest of that time as I'm trying to get to that cool thing? Yeah. And one thing that I saw, and if you can go a little bit more detail about this with Aiyana, is that you have like different spells. Like the one that I got early was the kind of like air gust. You can kind of like hover over water power. What was it like coming up, or like, are there any other spells or any kind of like movement transversal abilities in the game?
I'm sorry, what did you say at the end there?
Any other kinds of like ways of like transversal or like movement based abilities or spells in the game?
Okay, yeah. So the hover's a big one there. I think the biggest one there is actually your sprinting attribute. So that's one of the ones that levels up quickest. Is that the more you sprint and run in the world, the quicker you can get around. I did have minecarts. That was something I spent a fair bit of time on, but I've had to scale them back for first release. I had too many issues, but that was something I wanted to have in there. But my way of trying to solve this is actually portals. So you can find a portal in the world and it'll randomly take you to another section of the world to kind of just cut out some of that middleman. And then once you do discover portals, you can attune them. So you can link them together in a bit of a network. So that way, once you have a portal to your base, you can use it as a way of just jumping around the world. So each time you find a new portal, it's now just somewhere you can go back to. It's not just a random one-to-one spot. It can go anywhere you want it to. So that was my way of trying to feel like there's bits of checkpoints in the world. So yes, you explore far, but now you can actually traverse between them, which is something I felt Minecraft was missing as well. The only way to kind of give yourself checkpoints was to make massive minecart rails, which I did enjoy doing. But at the time, it felt like the only way. Later on, they obviously added things like, I've noticed people that get some sort of wing and can use fireworks with a wing to get around. So that's only something I've discovered recently. So I'm trying to decide how much I need to add these features to try to make sure there's other ways to explore. But Aiyana as a core, as I say, with the infinite leveling up and the sprinting attribute, that already gives you a pretty good way to get around pretty quickly. And I don't think for other spells of another one, there's like enhanced sprints. So there's ways you can invest more stamina to get around even quicker, but it's basically just you're still sprinting around.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, of course, Crackdown and being able to just keep jumping higher and higher and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've got, so if you level up your jump enough, and you can have a high jump spell, a buff. Oh, actually, I might have removed that. There was a buff from potions and from meals where it would let you jump really high as well. So if you combine all of them, then yeah, you can get a pretty absurd jump height. I may have scaled that one back in the potions. I'll have to double check that. It's a problem with making a game for so long, is I forget what's currently in and what was in at one point and didn't work, and I had to remove. But yeah, I'll have to look into that one actually.
All right. And another thing I want to ask you about, especially when it comes to, like, again, more of these open-ended or survival crafting in general, is the onboarding. Because this is another, like, very pivotal aspect of these kinds of games, is how easy do you, or how quickly and how easy is it to get someone kind of off to the races in these kinds of games? Like I said, like earlier, like with the ones that I like Power World and Subnautica, it's very easy. Like, their onboarding is very quick. It kind of gets you into it. Conversely, you have something like Rust or Ark, and it's a lot harder. Like, they're meant to be far more punishing. So, with Aiyana, I know you have kind of like the starting set of quests, starting onboarding. Could you talk a little bit about what was it like coming up with how you wanted to teach the player about the game?
Yeah, that was another one that was a lot of iteration. So again, because we spent so much time with kids, that was one where it was just really hammered on the head with things that they got stuck with. So the biggest problem we had there is that Minecraft is obviously this big looming thing that everyone has played. So as soon as people pick up the game, I suppose, especially at events, the first thing I'd say to them, especially when it's a kid and they look nervous, I'll just say, "Have you played Minecraft?" And they say, "Yep." And they say, "Oh, it's just like Minecraft." And they're just like, "Oh," it just instantly transformed from someone being nervous to, "I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go play this now." And even though that's great as a way of like breaking the ice, it's also for expectations are set. So whatever Minecraft does, that's what they expected. So that was a problem for me because I was trying to do things differently from Minecraft. So for example, the biggest one that I struggled with was the auto-equipping tools. So for those that haven't played Aiyana, like what I got sick of in Minecraft is you have to keep swapping between, oh, I'm looking at dirt, get your shovel out. I'm looking at pickaxe, so I'm looking at stone, get your pickaxe out. And I find that tedious. So in Aiyana, it's automatic. So whatever you're looking at comes out automatically. And that was really hard to communicate to people. Like, it was, the first thing they do is when they craft a tool, we'd be like, "Where's it gone? Why is my tool not here anymore?" Like, so I'd have to like point at a tool belt and be like, "Okay, this is your tool belt. This is how it works." And we had to go round and round in circles, and we had to iterate on that so many times before kids finally got it. And the final moment for us was a video. And I don't know why, like, they didn't even watch the video, but just by having one there and seeing it for the second time, they'd be like, "Okay, I've got this now." And they would, from now on, nobody seems to struggle. But yeah, up until that point, it was just kind of trying to break that cycle of, no, I know Minecraft does this, but this is how we do it differently. And I guess that was kind of like my main always focus with the onboarding, is just anything that I did different from Minecraft, I had to communicate that it was different and why it was different. So yeah, that was a lot of a focus for me onboarding, and everything else was just kind of, I guess that's the beauty of Minecraft. Everything else is so kind of intuitive, the simplicity of what you're trying to do there. So like, I don't really try and teach how to click a block. You know, a lot of kids and a lot of people just do that naturally. "Ooh, can I do this?" "Oh yeah, I can." "Great." Yeah, just kind of leave you to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that is a really good point about the kind of like that trap of what to teach the player and what not to teach the player. And I've seen a lot of developers kind of slip up on that point because, as you said, like if you tell someone it's like Minecraft, then they kind of have like the basic schema of what the game's about. But if there's anything that's not Minecraft or un-Minecraft in your game, you have to onboard that. Because again, how is someone going to know how this works if it wasn't in that game? And I've seen so many developers struggle with that fact of, if it's unique in your game, like they've never seen this before, how the heck are they going to figure out how it works in your game?
Yeah, absolutely. onboarding is something that I spent a lot of time on. Like, it's so easy as a developer to kind of leave it off as a last second, but you got to get it right from the start. Like, it's such an important part of it because people get frustrated straight away as soon as they come across that mechanic that they've not quite clicked on the same way as you do. Then it's extremely frustrating where a developer expects you just to figure it out.
Yep.
I was going to name an example there, but I probably shouldn't name and shame, so I won't do that.
And to your point about having the different tools auto-equip, like you don't need to have them in your hotbar, like that's another really good like aspect. It's a good UX feature, but it's like you said, it's also something you need to inform the player about because it's so easy again to fall into that trap of I'm going to remove these pain points or remove these issues, but if the player is accustomed to them or they know about them and they're not there, they're going to think, what the heck is going on? I crafted this pickaxe, why can't I equip it? So obviously the game must be bad, so I'm going to uninstall it. So you have to have that, like and again, like for developers watching this, here's a free game design lesson for you about onboarding. That again, even if you make something easier or streamlined, if it's different or if it's not something people normally expect, it still needs to be onboarded to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the difficulty of trying to make things too simple as well. Like, so you say that it's a good UX. I do feel like it is a good UX now, but one of the things I struggled with is there's another game in the genre called Creativerse, and it was free to play for a while, and it is a good game. But the way that it gets around it, it does a similar thing where it's just you have a glove instead, and the glove does everything. But I felt like that took away the progression. You know, that's something that you're so used to in Minecraft in terms of, I've gone from my wooden tool to my stone tool, and you've got the differences in the blocks, and it just kind of, I think it simplified things too much, and it gave you less variety to be able to experiment and kind of tweak with your tools. It's not something I've done yet in Aiyana, but one of the things I want to do is, for example, if you've got the pickaxe, is be able to customize it. So instead of just hitting one block for lots of damage, you could do it, say, it would hit many blocks at once. So if you're trying to dig out, say, a big 9-block 3x3 area, it could hit all of them at once. So that's something I like to experiment with more in the future, and you would lose that by oversimplifying. And that's something I spent a fair bit of time thinking about, is how to actually kind of balance this, so I wasn't just making things too automatic and feeling like, I'm now don't have to do anything, this is too easy, versus have a little bit of progression, but not tedious, just swapping tools.
Yeah, and again, that's another really good point, because it's so easy to kind of remove, if you kind of smooth all the edges out of your game, people may think, well, it's just basic, it's boring, I walk up, hit this block for 20 minutes, I'm done, where's the rest of this game? And it's always that tough balance to strive for with titles where you want to introduce something that is challenging or is unique, but you need to present it in a way that doesn't just completely alienate the person. Like, to go back to the goals example from earlier, telling someone that your game has 10 million goals for you to achieve, they'll probably look at you with fear in their eyes and run away.
Yep.
But if you present it as, okay, here's 10 goals. Okay, you beat these 10 goals. Now here's another 20 goals. Here's, 5 really hard goals. If you present it in a way that kind of guides the player towards that task, they're often more receptive to doing that. Even if, again, your game may end up having a million separate things to do, if you present it well enough, the player won't feel like it's a million things that they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's something where, I've struggled with that as well in terms of when everything's so open, it's like, when do you gate things and when do you prevent it for people to get there? I could just give you all the mechanics off the bat, but then, I've got a fan who plays quite regularly, and it's then, when is it frustrating to get access to a feature versus, I know this feature's in here, I want it now, but I don't want to have to go through the hoops, and it's like, it's difficult to find the balance of when to give them that, but I think it is very important to make sure you're gating the features and that, everything's not just given to you right off the bat, because then that's exactly the problem with Minecraft. It's too open, you don't know where to start.
Yep. And that, again, is another that, as a kind of a bit of a tangent, it's always one of the things that stops me from enjoying a lot of the open space-based games. Where, okay, here's the entire universe, you're this tiny little ship, go. And I'm just sitting there going, well, go where? What am I doing? What should I even be focusing on? And, to bring this back to, World of Warcraft and MMO design, again, like having this kind of like starter quest or the opening area, or even like something like with like Breath of the Wild, Zelda having like the tutorial island, like having some kind of foothold for the player in an open-ended game is very pivotal. Because again, like there are people, and I'm sure you've had them in your audience, like there are the hardcore fans. They will dig into every inch of your game. They will figure it out. They will break your game every which way but loose. And they don't care about onboarding. They don't care about how the tutorial's set up. They're the, again, we've heard this before, the get good audience.
Yep.
But you still need something, and that something is very hard for a lot of developers. As you said earlier, as the person who built the game, you know how it all works. You know exactly what order to do things, what items to get, what research, tech, tools, whatever. But how do you convey that to someone who, A, maybe they have 10 billion hours in Minecraft, and they know the Minecraft side, but they don't know the Aiyana side? But, how do you convey this to someone who maybe this is literally their first survival crafter? Maybe they've never played Minecraft. And it's hard to do. And it's something, like, again, like for people who watch this channel or follow me long term, they know I harp a lot on UI UX. Because these are the points that can drive someone who could be a longtime fan of your game out the door, and they're never going to come back.
Absolutely, yeah. So speaking of what you mentioned there in terms of like the big space games, EVE Online, I think was the first example that came for me, because it's a game where I like the premise of it, but you could tell it's fundamentally flawed in the sense that they have people who volunteer their time to go around and speak to new players and ask them things like, "Do you know what you're doing?" Like, and I had someone who would do this to me when I was playing, and I thought it was a bot. I thought it was somebody who was just like, it was just, spam or something like that. They were trying to get me to join a guild or something along those lines. I didn't realize, this is what they do, is to make sure people understand the game. And like, it's pretty flawed. And it's similar with League of Legends, where they admit that in their design, but right now a lot of how the game works is that you need a friend to explain it to you. And I think that's a very strange way to kind of approach a game and to not focus on any sort of tutorial to get into it. It's just like, well, then how do you start then? What if you're not a particularly social person and you now have to rely on a friend playing the game? And I think that's quite not exclusive, not inclusive, I guess. I think it's a very strange way to approach it.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's why you need to have onboarding as part of your process. And like that example of having someone like just hiring people to be like the tutorial is just hilarious to me. And
well, we don't even hire them; it's just volunteers. It was it's nuts. But, yeah,
that is just, it's causing me like some kind of I'm getting like a mental like headache right now just thinking about it from a UX perspective. And yeah, like you mentioned, of course, League of Legends. That's another really good example where. And like conversely with League of Legends, we also mentioned earlier about the wiki, that having to look outside of the game itself to learn the game is something that was a huge practice like 20, 30 years ago. The war games genre is a big example of this. Like anyone who's tried to learn something like Steel Panthers, Gary Grisby's World War, like that whole subgenre of super high-end turn-based strategy, they do nothing in terms of onboarding in those games. Like there is zero. And as I said a few minutes ago, like to their audience, they're fine with that. Their audience are old people who've played all these games. They know how it all works. But if you're someone new, if you're trying to jump in for the first time, it's borderline impossible. And as a very fun point, as you were just saying about having a friend walk you through something, I was like, at the time of recording this, of course, it'll be about 2 weeks, my friend was showing me a Steel Battalion 2. And he was walking me through that as we were doing an online match, because I was not going to figure that one out on my own.
Yep. I always struggle when it's like that. I just kind of feel like they've missed something out, and I'm just like, it does instantly put me off whatever someone's trying to teach me. I'm just like, why do I need someone else to teach me? I should be able to figure this out myself. And I just, yeah, I don't want it to be like this super frustrating first like 10 hours, 20 hours of a game, whatever, just trying to get into it. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yep, and again, like for developers listening to us right now, the days where you can say that the real game begins at X amount of hours and make that a marketing point are long gone. If someone's not enjoying your game within like a minute of loading it up, mostly they're not going to stick around. And
Yep.
like to like the survival. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's an easy way to prove that as well. It's something I found quite shocking. If you go to pretty much any game, you can probably do it on Steam, but the best examples I found was on PlayStation or Xbox. Go look at the achievements and go look at the percentage of people that get them. And it's always something stupid where it's like 50% of people don't complete level 1 or don't complete the tutorial. I'm just like, it's pretty scary looking at the drop-off rates of a lot of these games that are out there. And it's just like, I don't know whether that's just people with short attention spans or if it's just they've done that bad of a job actually onboarding and getting you into the game.
I'm smiling right now because one of the things I was doing was reviewing the achievement rates of games because I've been studying them as well. Like with any game that I finish or play, I will immediately go to the achievement rate or the achievement page just to see what is happening. And yeah, again, like for developers watching us right now who haven't done that, do it. Do it to like whatever's like a popular game that you've played, and just watch in horror as it goes from like 100 to 75 to 30 to 10. And again, there are games where you will lose 30 to 50% of the player base within 20 minutes. Yep. And again, like for some people watching us, they may be thinking we're kidding. No, like even in like super popular games that people have said are like game of the year, these are the games that define video games as a medium, they'll still lose almost half the player base within that time. And again, it's like I said a few minutes ago, this is why I, harp so much on UI UX. Because even if your game is good, if you just lost 70% of the players within 10 minutes of loading it up, how much potential revenue and fan base did you just lose because your onboarding was bad?
Yeah, and we're not going to tell our friends, and it's exactly. It is pretty scary, especially when you're trying to think about what to focus your time on. I get why a lot of developers, when they look at the end and you're saying like, oh well, as much as the ending is vitally important, because if you get to the end of the game like Mass Effect and it's a terrible ending, then people are going to talk about it, people are going to complain. But then you look at it and it's only something like 1% of players get there. It's I can understand, but it's also I think it's the biggest problem with AAA right now is that they look at things a little bit too clinically and they look at the data too much and they kind of like, the data says only 1% of players get to the end, so 1% of our development time is spent on it. It's like, no, that's not going to end well either.
Yeah, that's the other end of the spectrum issue when where a game doesn't stick the landing of how it ends. Because again, the days in which we can say, this is something I want to ask you about with Aiyana, when we talk about like long form games, games that are, when we say long form like 30 years ago, that was like 80 to 100 hours of gameplay minimum. Today, long form can mean very different things for certain people. If you tell someone that your game is 500 hours long, even if it's 500 hours of amazing content, they may not want to invest in that. And there are people who do like that. There are some people who they want that one game that becomes their everyday game for the next 2 years. Again, there are people who've probably played stuff like Stardew Valley, Factorio, Minecraft, especially Minecraft, day in and day out, no matter what. So, for Aiyana, like kind of like as you've been building, as we've said, the struggle between onboarding and design. How did you decide on what would be the end of a game like this?
So this is where early access comes into play. So for me, there's definitely not an ending yet. So how I've designed it is you build your totem, and if you upgrade that to a certain level, you get a portal, and that takes you to a new world, kind of like the Nether in Minecraft. You get to the bottom of that, you've got a world to explore, and you fight your first boss. So what I've got in mind is this is the start, this is what I have, and I'm trying to decide how many layers do I want to go down. So yeah, I guess the trick for me of where the end will be is where I kind of feel like all the mechanics are cohesive. So, for example, one of the big mechanics I want is to have natives and villagers. And natives and villagers will then kind of automate their village and they'll do things for you like gathering stone and gathering wood. So, to me, if I get to that point where I've got a native and villager and I feel like actually I want to have that extra layer of progression where, say, I don't know, to build a fishing net, I want it to be you have to get to the bottom of the next world layer. I guess at that point when I've run out of like those links where I've got this mechanic that relies on this feature, to me, I guess that's where it'll kind of run out, is where there's a good balance between the amount of resources that are available and there's enough time in between to find those resources, and it kind of plugs all these big features that I want to have. That's where I feel like I kind of be complete, is where it's cohesive. Because otherwise, it'll just go on forever. You know, I don't want this to turn into, oh, let's just add another layer and you do a new layer every year, and it's just like that's going to get boring quick. So I'm not aiming for anything like that.
Yep, and it's good, I think, from a design perspective, to think about your game as having an end. That there is this point where you can tell people you're done, because then you can bounce the game around that. Because again, like, pacing and progression are such big points about this. You, like we've said, like, you have the infinite skill leveling system. You could theoretically just keep throwing in, let's just raise all the stats of all the enemies, like another 10% for another world, and we'll just repeat that indefinitely. And maybe there will be someone who will like that, who they'll go to new game plus 1,000, and they'll enjoy it. But how many people will be interested in investing in that? And you need to have this idea as to when can someone say that they've finished your game.
Yeah, and that's something that's really difficult in this genre because, well, like I say, like I never took on the Ender Dragon, I never finished the game in Minecraft, but it's just something that I want to address, and I do want to feel like you've beaten that end boss. So yeah, it's something that I definitely have keenly in mind. Like objectives are something that I really want to solve in this, so it's something that I'm very orientated towards. But I can't, until I have all the pieces in front of me, I don't think it's right for me to kind of have that ending in place, and especially in such an open game. But yeah, it's something I do very firmly keep in mind because, like I say, I felt like it was a disappointment that the Ender Dragon was a goal in Minecraft, but it was just like I just didn't feel motivated to go and complete it. So that's something I'm very keen to kind of make sure you are motivated, and there are good rewards for doing so. And also, I've played a lot of Final Fantasy growing up, so you know, there's always that good kind of like I've beaten the end boss, and now what's the extras? So I've kind of that's something I like to emulate. Is kind of okay, you've beaten the game, but now this is where the real challenge begins. So that's something that I want to kind of keep in mind as well.
And in terms of like overall progression with Aiyana, like, and again, like with the game, you know, still with the demo, I'm sure things will be changed in the future. But how did you want to, I guess, like introduce? Like, are there different mechanics that get introduced as you get further in? Because again, like I said, like I played the demo, so I saw the skill system, I saw crafting, and I saw kind of like the start of like the spells. Is there like how else are you going, or like what else will there be in terms of progression that someone can see as they go through the game?
Okay, so one of the big features I want to add next will be animal handling. So I want that to be more about raising your animals, and I guess that's where it gets difficult then because so once that's in there, the idea will be that you have genetics. It'll be kind of like if you play Final Fantasy VII, the older one, like the chocobo breeding. So it'll be a little bit like that. And I guess in that sense, the progression there would be you've now got the max chocobo, or well, in this case, it'd be the max cow or a max sheep or whatever. You've managed to min-max those stats. So I guess the difficulty here in the open world genre or the kind of open sandbox genre is that progression will be catered to each mechanic. So in animal handling, it'll be I've got the best animal. In enchanting, it'll be I found the best enchantment combo for me. So the best enchantment combo might not be about combat. It might be about, well, actually, I'm a farmer. I want to get more crops out of my farm or something along those lines. So yeah, I guess, yeah, it's very much gated towards each mechanic and each feature that's going to be in there. And this is why ultimately I want to have those structures that come together so that you build that big castle and the enemies attack you. So that then the progression will be I've got a new high score. You know, I've beaten my friend, you know, or we've managed to get somewhere on a leaderboard so we can post it online and say, look, we managed to build this really cool way of killing enemies or something like that, as a way of all these systems should be feeding into that if that's the sort of player that you are. And this is where it's difficult because I spent so much time focusing on everything looking good. What I found is that a lot of players just like exploring. They're not really interested in progression. They just want to explore the world. So catering to both sides of that has been quite challenging because, for example, I'm trying to get feedback of people progressing the game by going down the mines and getting the metal that they need, and they don't care. They want to explore the pretty world. They want to go and from playing for 30 minutes or whatever. So it's something that I'm going to have to try and figure out post-release, because I've not been able to get enough feedback for people playing for long periods of time, which is exactly where early access is great. Is that I can kind of be upfront and to like, yeah, here's your foundation, but I need a lot more feedback to kind of see how you play and how this goes. So it's going to be changing a lot as the game progresses.
Yep, and that I think is a really good point about kind of like the open-end nature of these games, is that there has to be, I think, some kind of hook between the different gameplay systems to kind of get someone to be really engaged. Because again, you will have someone who will be 100% exploration-minded, you'll have someone who's 1% goal-minded, and they'll be fixing that no matter what. But kind of getting someone to explore, or getting someone to make goals as well, it's very tricky to, again, have that carrot on a stick. Like, to bring this back to Pal World, one of the things I said in my analysis that I felt was really good was like how the different pals were connected to exploration, which is connected back to base building, which is once again connected back to the getting more pals in the world. Like, that connection that kind of gets someone to do all this is very important. The same, I think, for Subnautica as well. That, hey, you want to find more stuff or get cooler stuff for your base, so you have to dive deeper. But in order to dive deeper, you need better vehicles, which means you need to explore. And it's like getting that loop down is very important, but it's also very hard to do, because if you, and I'm sure you've ran this with some of the playtesting, if you try to force someone to do a gameplay system that they're not interested in, they're going to feel like that's an act of betrayal. That if someone wants to explore, but you say, oh, but you need to craft the diamond hiking boots in order to climb this mountain, or you will never be able to achieve it, but I don't want to do crafting, they're going to feel like the game is just horrible, or it betrayed their interests.
Absolutely, yeah. The way I try to think about this is that there's a challenge when you accept it. That's something I keep in mind for design. So if you're just out exploring the world, I don't want there to be too much of an ambush challenge, but you have control of when you want it. So, for example, the challenge is at night. So if you go exploring at night, you're going to be attacked and it's going to be difficult. But if you know what you're doing, you walk around with a bed. So you can bypass the challenge. If you want to be an explorer player, you can just go walk around. Oh, it's turned into night, sleep in a bed, continue. And then at that point, if you want to progress, then you have to take on the challenges and able to progress. You have to go mining down in the mines where you will get attacked and there's nothing you can do about that. But it's your choice at that point to go and take on that challenge. Same with the totems, so if you want to you trigger these wave of enemies to attack you, you've chosen to trigger those wave of enemies, so then it removes that frustration of like, well, I chose this, I brought this on myself, and when I failed, because I wasn't prepared. So that's the kind of mindset I keep for these things, it's not a forced challenge, it's a chosen challenge.
And again, that's a really solid point. It's something that you have to understand as a designer, that there's a difference between, this goes back to the whole goal-oriented system, there's a difference between telling someone you must do 50 tasks if you want to level up, versus them saying, you know what, I want to level up. Oh, this is what I need to do. I'm going to go and do them. And again, it is amazingly difficult to do this in like an open-ended or open world structure. Because like we've said, people will do anything. They will do all kinds of things in your game when you're trying to say, hey, go over here, go get this item, go complete this quest.
Absolutely. It does drive me a bit nuts of the guy who tests for me. Like he clearly loves exploring, and every time I see him send me a screenshot, I can see the objectives in the top left, and he stops at a certain one every time. I was just like, oh, just finish that objective already. But he clearly he's just not what he finds fun about the game. So fair enough. That's how he wants to play.
Yep. And then you could have, in one way, you could have set up like progression gates, saying, "Oh, you can't go here until you've hit a certain level, or you need a certain piece of gear." Which that would fix one problem, but it would create a lot more issues in terms of player expectation.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, he would be frustrated if I forced him to finish that objective before he could explore the world in some ways. Which I don't know if you've heard of a game called Hightail.
Sounds familiar.
So they posted an announcement trailer quite a few years ago actually, and it had ridiculous hype. It set records for how many trailer views that it had, and it's similar to what I'm doing. It's basically Minecraft but better. That's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the systems that I'm not so sure about for them is, which makes it much more progression orientated, is the further you walk away from Origin, the harder and harder the game gets. Mm-hmm. Now, the first thought of that is I quite like that. As someone who likes a challenge, that makes sense to me. The further you walk, the more difficult it's going to be. But it does kill it for that exploration player. It's then, well, if they just wanted to explore, they're then forced to come back. And I'm curious to see how that one plays out. Like, obviously, that's just based on some text on their website. Never actually played the game. Maybe they do it in a different way and it works out better. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting way of approaching the problem.
Mm-hmm. And like we said, it also has to do with like the market they're aiming for. If you're positioning your game as, super combat-focused Minecraft, you'll get those people who they just want to go out and hack and slash their way across. They don't care about, what's over the horizon as combat focus. But again, as I'm sure you're well aware, I'm sure everyone watching is well aware of, how you market and position your game is going to be very important. If you tell someone, hey, you can explore everywhere, but then you say, oh no, you gotta stop right here, they're going to think you lied to them. And then, like we said earlier, once they leave, they're not coming back. They're gone.
Yeah, this is part of why I've been keeping a demo up, and a demo will stay active even when a game goes on sale, because I want to kind of set expectations from the beginning. People can say it. And to be fair, a big part of this is performance. So because I'm trying to be the nicer version of Minecraft, it does have higher performance requirements to run Aiyana. So I just want to be able to make sure that it runs on people's machines before we spend money and get the refund. Mm-hmm. And I'm under no illusions. I'm pretty sure that's going to cost me a lot of sales, because so many people do have that, I want to try it, and I will play for 30 minutes, and the demo will give them first 30 minutes. But I'm hoping by doing that, I kind of have a better positive review ratio. I'll have less people who play the game, get frustrated, and give me that negative review. I think that's just slightly more important, because, it means that people have the right expectations, and I've catered to the audience that I've catered for, instead of trying to cater to everyone and failing.
And again, like, trying to gauge the market is going to be very tricky, again, for any genre, let alone this. And as I said at the start, like, we are recording this, it will be about maybe a month, maybe even less than a month, for when Aiyana will go on to early access. And Jason, if you are free in the future, come and talk more about this and survival crafting. I would love to have you back on.
Sure, yep. Mm-hmm. I can't guarantee that, because I have a feeling I'm going to be extremely busy once this releases. It's such a big game, so the amount of support I'm going to have to do on this is going to be pretty chaotic for a first while. But yeah, I'd love to be back otherwise, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, to begin to wrap things up for our conversation, I want to kind of talk about kind of what your game plan or roadmap is going to be for Aiyana. So, again, to recap for people watching, the demo is up. It will remain up for the game. So, you are going to be launching this in the middle of April.
Yep.
For people listening to us right now, in terms of kind of, I guess, like demo versus early access, will there be any major differences in terms of what's available beyond just like the 30-minute time limit? Or I think it was like an hour when I tried it.
Yeah, it's an hour, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the whole point is, I'm trying to be very transparent with that demo. So, the demo is exactly the same game. It's just got that hour time limit, and saving or loading is disabled. So pretty much what you see in the demo is what you're going to get. Right now, the mindset I'm in is very much just stabilization. I'm just trying to fix as many bugs as I can before release. I mean, it's only 2-3 weeks away, so it's it's way too little time for me to add any new features and to try and stabilize that before release. In terms of a roadmap, there's loads of big features I've got in mind. Like, one of the first big ones I want is animal handling. Also, creative mode. Creative mode is something that's going to be extremely important to a subset of players. I just kind of feel like that's the 50-50 split. It's going to be a lot of people just want to build big things versus people want to play the game. So yeah, creative mode needs to get a lot of attention, and it's something that I've never played with in Minecraft is a creative mode. So obviously all my debug tools are basically creative mode. But it'll just be like the little quality of life features. So I've already got like a structure builder system. So that's basically a way of copy and pasting blocks around the world, like groups of blocks. So instead of having to repeat constantly building a castle wall, you make one castle wall, copy paste. But other than that, I need the feedback. I need to be able to speak to people who like this mode and kind of like, what are the things that are important? What are the mods that are really important in this mode? And that's just going to take time. So I don't want to half-arse it and put something out there that doesn't quite cater to those needs until I've spoken to enough people that actually use it.
And I'm glad you mentioned the blueprint mode, because I was about to bring that up because I forgot to ask you about it. So that you can basically just copy any structure that you've built, and then you can build it anywhere else in the game.
Exactly, yeah. So what it is, you start with a couple of stakes, you put them down, and it maps out an area for you. And then anything you build in that area, you can then save. And then, yeah, exactly, you can copy paste it. So the idea is you build a turret or you build a wall, and then you can just paste that. So when you're making these big structures, you don't have to do a lot of the repetitive work, all these kind of modular elements. Just something we do as game developers. I'm just like, well, why don't we give it to a player? It's something I find very useful day to day. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess as a question, can someone export that out to give to someone else?
Yep, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, and I think to me that's one of the things again, for people who watch me play survival crafters, the one thing that just always grinds my gears when I try and play them is having to build generic structures over and over again. Make sure the house is properly aligned, make sure the stairs are set up. So yeah, I would be all over that. So just have a friend say, just build me house with a crafting section, put it down. I'm just gonna go back out to complete all these goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And for people listening to us, in terms of development plans, or in terms of patches and updates, do you have a rough idea of what you're looking for in terms of how long you'll be, or how often you'll be patching or updating the game?
Absolutely none at all. So as in no plan. So this particular topic I could spend forever talking about is where time boxing development is the stupidest thing you could ever do. Because as soon as you try and time box it, you sacrifice, you constantly compromise to hit that time box. And you should never be compromising the game. The game is what should come first. So basically, the way that I've been doing patches so far, and I plan to keep doing in the future, is when it's ready. So when I feel like we've hit a good stabilization point, if I'm hitting a critical feature, a critical bug fix, there might be a patch every day. And it hits a point where I add a new feature, then it's when that feature is done, and when it feels like the game is stable again, then there'll be another update. Because otherwise, yeah, it just becomes half-baked, and there's not enough bugs fixed, and you've made too many compromises, and it's just not going to be great.
And again, especially for something like Aiyana or any kind of procedural generated game, it can take far longer than you may realize to do anything in it. As, again, someone who's been working on a game for 8.5 years can certainly attest to. For every indie developer who's watching this right now, who has said to themselves, oh, this feature will only take 6 months, maybe 9 months to do, it won't be that long. And I just cause so much mental anguish in every developer watching this right now with that line.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I say, I started this as a challenge, and I'm a very, I guess these ways to describe it is, I'm a very competent developer. I'm very quick. I'm able to get a lot done, and it's still taking me this long to get the game done because it's that big. It's what it is. It always takes far longer than you'd expect.
So, speaking of that point, I'm sure you have an answer to this one. Do you have any idea of a timetable for when Aiyana will go out of early access?
No, not at all.
I had a feeling.
Yeah, just when I feel like there's a lot of core features I've got in mind, so things like the animal handling, the enchanting. So I feel like once I've hit all these core systems, that's the point where I'm like, okay, we're going to be coming out of early access. But yeah, how long it'll take to get there. Even multiplayer made a foundation on. I had to scale it back from first launch because I couldn't get it to a state that I was happy with for day one launch. That's going to be so much work, and as soon as that's added in, everything we add on top of it is going to take twice as long because we're going to have to account for multiplayer and single player, and yeah, everything will slow down, so it's impossible to touch timelines.
And to that point about putting Aiyana onto early access now, one question I always like to ask developers when it comes to going onto early access: what was like your decision to put this specific build or whatever the build will be on like April 12th, April 14th onto early access? Or I guess like to frame this better, how did you decide that now is the time to kind of release your game, I guess unofficially / officially on the Steam?
For me, I guess it's more personal rather than game related, in a sense where it's just taken far too long. 8.5 years is just a ridiculous amount of time to already be working on one project. Like I know, like it's way too long. So I need to get it out there. I'm always delaying. It's never going to be good enough. I'm someone who's always like, I don't know, if I have this, it'll be good. If we have that, that's good. And I just kind of had that kind of wake up call of, I worked a contract last year. It paid me ridiculously well, and it was enough for me to not have to work for basically a year. And when I ran out of funds, I was kind of looking at it, and I was like, do I really want to go back to paid work? And I was just like, I really don't. So I was just like, well, if I don't want to go back to paid work, I've got to release now. So basically, the date was picked as something where I felt like I can get it stable at this point. And a lot of other factors as well, to be fair. So I was actually considering releasing March 11th. But when I put that forward to Steam got back to me and said, actually, spring sale is on. Don't release around the spring sale. So I delayed it a month because 11th is actually my wedding anniversary. So that's why I first picked that date. And I've now delayed it to April 12th because Fallout is releasing on April 11th. And I just kind of, even though it's only a TV show, I was like, I don't know, a lot of gamers will be watching that. So that kind of felt like a bit too high competition. So yeah, but that's basically where my mindset came into play, with just a lot of pressure of, this has been too long. I don't want to go back to paid work. I need to just release something and see if it sticks or not. If people don't like it, then fair enough. Maybe I need to move on to something else if it's completely dead. But if there's an audience there, then I'll just keep maintaining it. And I just need to know that there is that audience more than anything else.
Yep. And again, like, it's very important to know if people are resonating with your game. It's exactly. A very simple idea, but it is something that a lot of developers have struggled with. And yeah, again, like as we said earlier, like a game like this could be like an endless game dev cycle. You could spend 10, 20 more years adding more and more and more to it. But again, like if you're, and this is something I say to a lot of developers, like if you're trying to make this as like a business, if you're trying to grow beyond just, making your dream game, you have to think about, what does the next 5 years of my studio look like? What is the next 10 years? The next 2, 3, 4 game projects? Because if you don't do that, it's so easy to A, burn out on your game, or B, just kind of burn out on your studio, that it just can't keep going.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's part of where it came for me, is where I feel like I'm 35, or I'm about to be 35 now, and I feel like I'm kind of in prime for my career. And I know I can earn, like I say, I worked before and I paid me for an entire year. I can earn very well if I want to. And that puts in perspective of, well, this is how much money I'm not earning by working on Aiyana. So I need to release it to kind of be like, well, now I can kind of look at this as like, right, am I going to go earn some money so that I can actually pay off my mortgage, so I can actually have, a better quality of life? Or is Aiyana going to provide that for me? So yeah, that's a lot of what I'm trying to do here, is tick those questions of, what do my next 5 or 10 years look like? Because I don't have a pension, and I should probably fix that.
All right, so I think with that, we can wrap things up, because I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about in the future. I know you're going to be very busy in the next 30 days and more. So I think with that said, final, I guess, like quick set of questions for you. So first off, anything else you want to mention about Aiyana's development, anything that makes it stand out, different, whatever? Go ahead and feel free.
God, it's such a big project. It's hard to kind of look over it. No, I guess not. Like, I feel like we've covered a lot here, and I think I could sit in here forever. Be like, oh, what's the best thing to talk about? Um, no, probably best not.
Okay. All right. So with that, for anyone watching or any fans watching, so you have anything you'd like to say to them? Anything to say about Aiyana? Just anything to kind of like end our cast on?
Uh, I hope you enjoy it. You know, like it's been an absolute labor of love. It's something that I've been working on for so long now for a reason. You know, for everyone out there who just doesn't want to fiddle around with mods, you know, this is just, you want that clean, out of a box experience, something you're just gonna, if you want to casually just enjoy walking around, then that's what Aiyana's can be for you. And there's going to be a lot of challenges in there as well. So if that's for you, then yep, hopefully I can deliver that also. Yeah, I'm going to be working on this, I think, for probably many years to come. Even if I do have to go back to paid work, it'll just go back to have to work on it slower. So yeah, hopefully we can establish an audience and yeah, be working on it for many years to come.
All right, sounds good. And I do wish you the best of luck with the game. Like I said, I played the demo and I enjoyed it, and I hope this does well for you, Jason.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's been great being here.
All right, not a problem. So, I guess one last point for you. Do you have anything social media you would like to plug? X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, whatever? Go ahead.
No, yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty bad about marketing myself, to be perfectly honest.
Me too.
I'm on Twitter, but I don't post particularly often. I've got a Discord as well. But I do check them, so if anyone wants to reach out to me, feel free to reach out on any of the platforms I'm at. I am on Facebook as well, I just realised, but I neglect that one a little bit. I forget it's there. But yeah, no, I don't spend that much time on social media. I keep to myself.
Me too. All right. So I'll include links to everything down below for people watching this recorded. And with that said, we're going to wrap up the cast here. So be sure to check out the demo. I'll include, obviously, a link to that. And check out the game when it is released, which probably at the time of scheduling when these will go up should be relatively really soon. So again, Jason, thank you so much for reaching out. And hopefully by the time this will go up, you won't be too stressed about the launch of it.
Cheers. Yep. Thank you for having me again.
All right. So for everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. Do the YouTubing stuff. Like, support the channel. We have our Patreon, PayPal, and all that available. Donations and support will go towards getting more daily streaming happening. So be sure to check that out. And again, if you are a developer working on a game or just want to talk game dev with me, I'm always looking for guests for this series. So please get in touch. With everything said, come back for daily sessions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you examine the art and science of games. And until next time, have a great night.